Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Sundayberries. Today, I am sharing the painting process of La Garita, which is a short video that I released back on Saturday and decided to share with you the long length video, although a little bit sped up, because I wanted to talk about a few things that I found really interesting. As some of you know, I am a complete newbie with watercolors, and I really am fascinated with this medium. I find it really difficult, number one, and at the same time, really interesting. And I feel like I want to really learn how to work with watercolors. My background in painting is abstraction, and I usually work with acrylics. So this media is completely foreign to me. Sure, we can all say that when we were kids, this is probably where we started with art in our lives, and Crayolas and tempera and all that stuff, but I really don't remember like what I was doing when I was 2, 3, 4 years old. So my first exposure to watercolors was back in 2019 when I purchased a little set of 12 watercolors, and I used it for a basically an underpainting for an acrylic work. So I wasn't really paying attention to the qualities of the paint or anything like that. I was just getting rid of the white of the canvas and moving on. But back in February, I stumbled across a few videos on YouTube about watercolors, and I was mesmerized. I was completely hooked from the beginning uh, until today. I continue. As a matter of fact, it's not like I continue. I'm even more in love with the media now than I was back in February. So I am completely intrigued and fascinated by the medium, and I just couldn't wait to get started. And this is only my second try at watercolors, the second painting I've done. And yes, it's not perfect. I'm quite all right with that because I'm basically learning. And to be quite honest, I made a ton of mistakes during this little adventure here with uh, La Garita de El Morro, which is basically a fortress in Puerto Rico. And uh, I can tell you that I approached it as if I was painting in acrylics. I am not a landscape artist. I don't know how to do botanicals or anything like that, or anything resembling anything that is in real life. And if I ever do anything that is based on reality, it's going to be very abstracted, or basically an abstract version of it. But this one, well, I was not aiming at reality. I was still doing my style of painting. I was trying to make something that was at least recognizable. So, in doing so, and now that I'm looking back at the whole video, I realized that I was actually using techniques that are very well known in watercolors, which are wet on wet, wet on dry, dry on wet, and dry on dry. And that was something that I wasn't aware of at the time. I have learned as have been learning more and more about watercolors. I realized that all those things I was doing, but it was because I had this background in acrylics. I did know one very important thing. Number one, well, actually, the only important thing is that you have to start from the lightest of lights and then work yourself through layers all the way to your darkest colors. And I did respect that rule because with watercolors, it's quite delicate and quite difficult. And the only whites that you should use are the white of the paper. And yes, you can use gel pens and you can use gouache and all that stuff to bring light into the work. But I thought, like, well, let me try to abide to using the white of the paper as my lightest value and work myself up. And that's what I did. In acrylics, uh, on the contrary, you can work backwards, forwards. It doesn't matter because you can never ruin an acrylic painting, really. You made a mistake, you can just go over it and continue on. With a watercolor, is quite different. If you make a mistake, which I did here in this painting, you have to either work around it, and if it's really, really a bad mistake, you have to just throw it away. There's no coming back from that. And so I was feeling a little nervous about trying to create something that I am not used to doing, but I was also very intrigued about the process. So I did go ahead and start this painting, and I was trying to be as careful as possible. I did mess up the ocean for a while because I went in pretty dark with the color, and that shows you how impatient I can be. And I had to fix it as soon as I was able to recognize that I was doing it wrong, and just lift off as much paint as possible and then continue on with another area and then return to the ocean, which in the end it came out pretty decent for the initial mess that I was doing. I enjoyed the process of layering down a color and then waiting for it to dry and then coming back to it and continue to layer upon layer upon layer. And that required a lot of patience for me, which in acrylics, I just move fast, energetically. I paint really, really fast. It's like a second nature for me. And with this one, I really had to slow down and be okay with that waiting periods and all that stuff that is required with watercolors. And I find that really attractive. It gives you a sense of tranquility, peace, and even focus, because you have to be really focused on what you're doing while you're doing anything with watercolors. And the only thing that kept me feeling fine about the process was the fact that I knew that the paper wasn't expensive because I was using Canzon XL, which is super affordable. I don't really like it, but I work through it. And the fact that it was inexpensive helped me to not to have that kind of pressure that I am ruining something that was expensive. And the second thing is that I did use a very inexpensive and student grade watercolor set, which is, by the way, amazing. It's by MeiLiang. And I was very surprised at this watercolor set. The pigments are very vibrant and absolutely amazing. It blew my mind away when I saw the coloring and the intensity of the pigments. when I was swatching them, which is another video that I will show you, because it is a very affordable paint set, and it's really, really nice. And I used it for this one. But the fact that I was using, number one, the inexpensive watercolor paper and the inexpensive watercolor set, I was fine. If something went wrong, I could just discard it and start over or do something else. And when you are learning anything new, you cannot start right off the bat with super expensive materials. And it's just something that will hinder you in terms of thinking I am wasting my paints, or I'm wasting my paper and it cost me so much, and all that stuff that goes through your mind. And when you're using something that is not breaking your bank, then you are okay with practicing and allowing yourself to be a little bit more free and experiment a lot more, and allow yourself to mess up, because it's quite all right. And the only way that we can actually learn any type of thing is through failures. Unless you make those mistakes, unless you're practicing all the time, you will, I mean, that's the only way to get anywhere with any medium that you're working with, or with anything in life, as a matter of fact. So I enjoy the process of learning. I have been self taught in art since I can remember. So getting into the process of learning watercolors has been a pleasure for me, because I really do enjoy learning other things where you can be creative and all that type of thing. The only problem for me is that like I mentioned, I am not a landscape painter. I am not a botanical painter. I am more into emotional painting, more of abstraction. And most things that I see around are usually landscapes or botanical paintings. And I have seen some abstractions done with watercolors, but I don't relate to those as much because I have a different style, I suppose. So I need to find out or figure out a way to get to my abstraction in watercolors. But until I do, I will be doing the botanicals, I will be doing the landscapes, I will be learning and practicing everything that I need to do in order to learn the process really well, and then start applying it to my style. Watercolors are just breathtaking to me. And at this time, I'm just willing to learn, and I'm hoping to share everything that I do, the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, and my failures and successes, and share this journey. And I have to say, I'm really glad that I took the step forward to start it out, because I was basically sitting as an spectator, sitting on the fence. Should I do it? Should I not do it? What would happen with my other practice in acrylics and that kind of thing? And you know what? Sometimes you just gotta take the plunge. And if you start out small and slow and humble, then you don't need all the expensive pigments and brands and professional colors, because you are starting out, you're learning about it. And yes, you're going to want to get to the major leagues, but while we are on the minor leagues, we stay in minor leagues. And I'll tell you, you can start with a budget of maybe $60 and be able to start working with watercolors right off the bat, because you can get a synthetic watercolor brush, you can get the Canzon XL paper like the one I'm using here, and you can get an affordable paint set like MeiLiang that is absolutely a punch of color. It has a really nice line of colors included in that set, and it usually runs for $20 or less. So you can do this at the top $75. And if you can't afford it all at one shot, just get your first one of the things. You can get a small pad of paper from Canzon XL for $11, and then the $20 the following month, and then a set of watercolor brushes for $15. So it's really affordable. There is no way you cannot do this. And then just start by going at it with the attitude of learning, and that you know that you're not going to make a masterpiece on the first try, and that it will take a long time to get to a different level. And that's the attitude I have towards this. And I was surprised that this painting actually looks a little bit good, and that it wasn't half as bad as I thought it would be, considering all the mistakes that I made. But that was because probably having the background in acrylics helped me out a lot. But that doesn't mean that I know how to paint or use watercolors. I wouldn't dream to teach you anything about watercolors except maybe saying, well, there is this technique and there is that technique, and let's just practice it a little bit, because that's the only thing we can do. But anyway, I just wanted to show you the whole process. The fact that I worked on layers. I did wait for each layer to dry before getting on to the next one. And because I was very surprised that when the watercolors dry, they dry like 2 tones lighter than you put it in. So you really have to go in to achieve very deep shadows and such things. And in terms of my texture, because this paint doesn't really create any granulation or any type of texture, I was able to achieve the texture of the wall by using layers and using a lot of dry on dry, which is the paper is dry and the brush is almost, I mean, it's really dry with pigment on it, and then you can just brush the paper and you will leave the thicker pigment on the paper, and that's how you get that sense of texture. Also, the paper was very helpful because since it's a very inexpensive paper, it will dry and leave marks of water and pigment where you left it off and you didn't soften it. And that also created texture for me. So that was really fun. And that was really exciting, because a lot of people do mind those things, but I really didn't. I actually enjoyed and used that in my favor because I really did need the texture. And the ocean, as you can see here, I finally was able to fix it. And it's not completely great, but at least it was something much better than what I started with. So, again, I wasn't worried about messing up, because messing up is part of the learning process. And that's the best example I can give you, and the best advice that I can tell anyone who's starting out with watercolors. And if you are familiar with watercolors or you are a watercolorist and you want to let me know or give me any tips and tricks, they will be super welcome and you can leave them on the comments below. I will be adding links to the materials that I used, and you can check them out in Amazon. The YouTube doesn't allow me to have a link by itself until like 2 months because I just opened the channel. But if you copy and paste the link that I will add, you can get straight to the materials that I used on this video. And to all of you who have subscribed or are thinking about subscribing, thank you to those of you who have subscribed. Thank you to those of you who have been returning to view new videos. And if you haven't and you're thinking about it, please do subscribe. Hopefully, we'll get to have fun while learning watercolors and exploring this incredible obsession and love that I've developed for this medium. I am really, really excited to learn about it and experiment and find out how far or how close I can get with it. So with that said, I will leave you to the little bit of video left because I've been rambling just too much, and I will see you on the next one. So please do take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye.